The Jacksonville Jaguars have extended Trayvon Walker, so I'll tell you what it means long and short term for the team here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Kicking it around here on a Monday, I'm Tony Wiggins on Locked On Jaguars, the host here. And let me tell you what we have going on for you today here. Messages are being sent, and they're good messages for the Jaguars. I'm in the show with that. Follow the money, not your emotions, is right smack in the middle of the show, but we'll lead the show with Travon Walker staying put for a while here in Jacksonville. I have to also let you know that today's show and episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets. If your first bet wins, head to FanDuel.com to get started. And getting started is exactly what we're going to do here today on the show here on Locked On Jaguars. You know, I often talk about this show being a continuous book, right? A perpetual book with endless chapters, and it doesn't matter where you jump in on the show at eventually. If you just hang in there and pay attention to the context and go around the spin cycle with us, you'll get caught up to everything that we've been talking about. And we have been talking about Trayvon Walker and the potential for him getting an extension for about 2 seasons now. I'd be naive if I tell you, or I'd be thinking you were naive if I did not tell you, that Trayvon Walker has been a very polarizing subject here, not only in Jacksonville, but around the National Football League. Most of it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant because the only people that it matters to are the Jacksonville Jaguars brass and the decision makers that had to make a decision, and one that they did. He signed a 4-year, $110 million extension that will kick in after the 2026 season, going with the 1-year, $15 million deal he has now. It's a 5-year deal for $125 million for a total amount of $92 million guaranteed when you think about the 77 in new guarantees and the $15 million that he's guaranteed this year. Good contract for both sides. It's not as if he absolutely broke the bank. He did not, but it's also not as if the Jaguars did not make a substantial commitment to that young man and who he is. And that's what this basically comes down to. They just have a type, man. And the one thing that you make a mistake from, I'm going to give some grace to people that thought that Trayvon wasn't going to get an extension, because based on the NFL and the things that you've seen, even around here in Jacksonville, under normal and different, I wouldn't say normal, but different and more, I guess, status quo or stereotypical management, that would have probably been something that you really did have to ponder. There was a lot of talk around the league about, okay, what do you do with a guy like that? What do you do with a guy like that? Well, first of all, you have to establish what you mean by a guy like that, because what the Jaguars have told you is a guy like that is exactly the type of player that they want on their team. The other part of it is a dude that's not super flashy, a dude that doesn't do a whole lot of things that surface level fans or surface level people in the media attribute to what you would see from $100 million player, right? This is the case, in my opinion, where they realize his value is in things that you don't necessarily see. You can actually see him too if you pay attention, but like I said, I'm not going to get into it going back and forth with people about what it is that they expect, because I think they've been trained or indoctrinated in the feeling that in order for a guy to get certain amounts of money, this has to happen, even though there's numerous examples of dudes who are not as good as him that got similar money just weeks ago. It still comes down to this thinking of, if I'm going to give a guy $100 million, he has to do this. Or if a guy was chosen number 1 overall, he has to do this. Or I need to look down on a stat sheet and see these numbers before I do that. But then if you go back 4 years ago with Yannick Ngakoue, it was the exact opposite. You had the sack numbers, you had the pressure, you had all of that stuff, and they didn't want to keep him and didn't want to pay him. And then he went and jumped around the league. He ended up getting the money anyway, minus about $5 or $6 million, but he did it on numerous different teams. And he's no longer, I don't think he's playing right now. So the Jags could have been right about that, could have been wrong. It doesn't matter. It's in the past. But the thing is the things that folks were saying why you don't pay a dude like that. Then they spend the next 5-6 years chasing a guy like that. It bewilders me sometimes. And see what it does is I'm glad fans and certain media don't make decisions, because that would be meaning you're losing in perpetuity. You're waiting for something perfect to line up, whether it's the perfect player to re-sign, perfect player to pay, perfect prospect. And that's just not the way it is, man. And it doesn't go that way. And we talk about that a lot on here, where you want an identity, you want consistency, you want a player that everyone on that team and everyone in that locker room respects, and you want someone that is productive, even if it's not the way you want the production to come. It's very similar to coaches that just don't settle for winning, but they want to win a certain way. That's called being stubborn. Like when you're up 28-3 in the Super Bowl and everyone tells you you should be running the clock, you want to keep doing it another way, and you end up getting walked down. See, that's what I mean. It's about winning. It's not winning and being stubborn about how you win. Who cares? Just take the victories. And Trayvon is the dude that delivers every time he goes on that football field. Every single time. Now, is there room for improvement? Yes, everyone knows that. Does that mean that what you're paying for is exactly what it's going to be for the next 3 or 4 years? No, I think there's still even more blue sky with Travon Walker. But Trayvon Walker has already exceeded a lot of expectations from a lot of people. If you take his draft spot that he was taken at away from it and just look at it for what it is, you would admit that he's a pretty good football player, especially on a team that wins a whole bunch of games. One of his worst statistical years came when the Jaguars actually played well, and it was because of his injury. But here's the thing. That injury was one of the sources of a lot of different conversations. And the conversation was, some people tried to pretend like the 3.5 sacks came and they didn't even know why it happened. And they watched every single game this year and was sitting there. He only got 3.5 sacks, man. That's just not enough. You got to get more sacks than that. On the surface, yeah, that's true. But the bottom line is there's a reason why he didn't have the sacks. And if you were sitting right there watching it, and I know I'm trying not to get hyped, but if you were sitting right there watching it, you knew he was banged up and you knew he was trying to play. In fact, if you go back to the 49ers game, and it's right here, go back to right after the 49ers game when they won that game, and I said, Trayvon got hurt. He punched the dude in the neck. I made a phone call, found out that he was flying to LA. He was going to have a second opinion, and there's a chance he could have a club. I came on this show either Sunday night or Monday afternoon and said there's a chance Trayvon could come back and play with a club. Trayvon didn't play that following week, but 2 weeks later, lo and behold, Travon Walker comes back with a club on his hand. And, it's like, well, obviously, that ain't no breaking news. But somebody told me that was going to happen. And I came on here and reported it because they said it was cool to report it. And I said maybe, because at the time they didn't know if it would happen. So he has his club on, and everyone with a brain can see that the dude is out there just trying to help the team. He's doing the best he can. He couldn't move his fingers. Therefore, and he had, at some point, he also had a little bit of a knee injury that started to bother him. But he was actually trying to help a team. It's how you frame it and how you view that's going to determine whether or not you thought he should have got the money or not. But what this teaches us about the Jaguars is they have their own way of evaluating things. What you think is a minus is probably a plus to them. Remember they talked about Jalen McLeod, how he played edge rusher at Auburn, but then he went to the Senior Bowl and they asked him to play off-ball linebacker and he did not have a whole bunch of success. Remember? They told you. He said, no, he didn't do well. But we were happy with the fact that he didn't complain and he went out and he tried. We know what his superpower is, and we're going to use him the way that he was used at Auburn, and we're going to try to use him that way. But the fact that he moved to another position probably was a red line for a lot of people, but for the Jaguars, it wasn't. It was like he didn't complain. He did what they asked him to do, and he tried. So we have a unique staff here in the point that most of the things that some people look at as things that will put them off are actually things that have drawn them closer to Trayvon. I'll tell you that I think they can do that for a couple of other people Who's next? Well, we'll talk about that later on. But in the second segment, I'm going to teach you how to follow the money and not your emotions before you decide who those next guys are going to be. We'll get to it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and that one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute it takes me to read this, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. With Indeed sponsored jobs, spend less time searching and hire the right candidates. Less stress, less time, more results when you need the right one to cut down and cut through the chaos. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs, and listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job get the premium job status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. All right, man, make sure you tap into the Everydayers Club. The Everydayers Club is here for you to give you a little bit more. If you're already an everydayer, you can get the Everydayers Club. Look down in the description of this podcast, whether you watch or listen, and click on it. And you'll get access to ad-free shows that go out to our audio platform partners, as well as merchandise access. That's right, merchandise to our Locked On, our gear, whatever you want, hats, all kinds of stuff. Are Locked On merchandise that you can only get on the Everydayers Club. Make sure you tap in. Had a little bit of a brain freeze there. What's going on? It's Monday, man. I gotta inhale more of this coffee or swallow more of this coffee. But I'm here for you, man. And Trayvon Walker is happy knowing that he has $77 million in guarantees. The Jaguars are absolutely thrilled to have him back, as well as they should be. Core piece of their defense. Maybe I didn't spend enough time earlier talking about that, but you all know what Trayvon does, man. Trayvon Walker I think he is one of the heartbeats, if not the heartbeat of the team. They absolutely don't play the same when he's not in the game. They do not. And there's a tremendous difference in their suddenness, in their physicality. He's better at getting pressures than he is at getting sacks. I think the one thing that they kind of did mention a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, it was somebody that mentioned it, that makes, would you like to see him finish some of those sacks or get a little bit closer? A couple of years ago when he had 10.5, I said he could have had 15 or 16. He let a couple of guys get away from him, but he's always doing his job, always about assignments. If you guys remember years ago, I asked Trayvon on the field after I asked him about what kind of soul food he eats. I did ask him, would he ever get away from the scheme and just go chasing sacks? He says, I'll never do that. I'll never get away from the scheme. And that's a good thing. Because how many times you've been in your job and your boss asked you to do something, and then when you did exactly what they asked you to do, and then it didn't go the way you wanted it to go, folks looked at you like you were incompetent. Now, did you have a boss that stood up for you and said, no, he's doing exactly what I asked him to do? Or did you have someone that says, yeah, fire him and get rid of him, we'll move on? Now, when I was in the military, we had some dudes that did the latter. They tell you to do stuff, and then they wouldn't protect you when you did exactly what they told you to do. And pretty soon, the owners, and not the owners, but the commanders, they realized who the weak link was. All right. The weak link wasn't the subordinates if they were all doing the same thing. The weak link was the person asking them to do it. So by that measure, and then there were other times when you had dudes that stood tall for you, said, blame that on me. That's not on him. I asked him to do it. And they said, why? And then they would proceed to go in the back room and they tell you why. And then they come out and say, carry on. So this is the thing, man. You need guys that not, I don't know if obedient is the right word, but that are tapped into what the overall process is, and that helps the team. And this is about the team. And that's what Trayvon Walker is about. And that is important. A lot of times we look at the emotion of wanting a guy to have 15, 16 sacks. Josh Allen had 17 sacks a couple of years ago, and the team was just okay, right? We want guys to put up numbers, but then again, we want to win. Remember when Maurice Jones-Drew led the league in rushing and the Jaguars weren't even a playoff team? And people say, what good does it do for you to have a running back that leads the league in rushing when your team is bad? I mean, and this stuff comes from other people in the media. So sometimes you just have to, I know most fans are just trying to get to the bottom of, okay, what's going to happen? What are we going to do? Well, now the Jaguars brass have now, this is 2 off seasons. They've given you an idea or a little bit of a template where you can really start looking at this and saying, okay, what are they going to do? And what are they going to do? 9 times out of 10 is something that you can't imagine that they're going to do, because they don't view and look at things the same way that everyone else views and looks at at certain stuff. I literally sometimes believe that in the mind of most people that analyze football, that there should be like 1 or 2 people that make the decisions for all 32 teams, and we'll just go about this status quo of doing things the way that they're done league-wide. However, when you look at the teams that really win, they seem to never do what everyone else is doing. They're trendsetters, and then eventually everyone starts doing what they are doing. So hopefully the Jaguars will get in front of that a little bit and be a team that everyone wants to emulate. After 1 year, just think about what you've seen after 1 year. When is the last time you've seen both Jaguar coaches, assistant coaches of offense and defense, the coordinators, get coaching jobs? When's the last time you've seen people snatching up position coaches? You haven't seen that here in a long time, because it hasn't happened. And the reason why it hasn't happened, because they haven't been doing anything groundbreaking until now. They haven't done anything where they did it their own way until now. And now you see people after only 1 year of success, but watching the process and looking at it and realizing that it's not a temporary thing. Now they want in. Everyone wants to do things the way that the Jaguars did it or are doing it. Now, that means that something good is going. Something good is happening. And generally what I usually say is a practice, and I know it's hindsight, but hindsight is follow the money. The money will tell you what they were thinking. And I know that sounds cliche and obvious, but let me tell you why. Because I do this every single day, multiple times a day now. And a lot of the comments and the feedback, and I get to it, and I promise you, I don't call you out by name or I don't do anything like that, but for the sake of discussion, it always seems to go down this road of the same old stale, the same old way of MO of doing business. It's just like it's the NFL formulaic way of team building. They're not going to do this because of this. They're not going to do that because of that. And this guy is going to get this because of this. And he got hurt in the contract year. And all of these things. Take all of your NFL norms and mores when it comes to the Jacksonville Jaguars and take them and toss them right out of the window. Throw them out. It does not matter. They're not going to be status quo. They're not going to do things for the same reasons that everyone else does it. They just don't move that way. And they've shown you that now. All of your mock drafts, 9 times out of 10, the Jaguars, I would bet that at least half of these mock drafts, the Jaguars won't take one person that me or anybody else says they're going to take. Especially the further you get away from the top. That's going to be very difficult for anyone to try to figure it out. But you got to remove your emotions. And the emotions are tied to what you're normally seeing other teams do, even the Jaguars, right? You got to take that stuff out of it. All of the fussing and the bickering and the arguing, and they ain't doing this and they ain't doing that. And how many times have I sat here and said, if we knew what they were doing, then they're doing something wrong? We don't know that. None of us do it, because it was too young. It was too not infinite, but it was too much in the infancy, if you will, of how we watched them operate. But now we're getting an idea of it. And I think it's going to lead to them even re-signing more of their own people. The message to me is our free agency is going to be spent more on retention than it is on going out and making a bunch of additions. I'll tell you why that's important. Segment 3 here on Locked On Jaguars. And today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. That is correct, man. The NBA playoffs are here where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. Here's what I like about it. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, the extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. Use the website, man. Make sure you go in there and get all the data you need before you make your decisions. And y'all need to head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Ain't no games being played here on Locked On Jaguars. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. Shout out to the everydayers that join us. It's your team every day. We always thank you guys for making us your first listen. I was busy over the weekend. I was actually eating ice cream with my son and my grandson, and the Trayvon news broke. I looked at my son who had driven us. I said, hey, man, we got to go. Tell Junior to wrap it up. He said, what? I said, I got to get back to the house. And Trayvon just signed a contract extension. So me and my son and my grandson with the ice cream all over his face, we made it back to the house, and I finally got back in. And I was just so ecstatic, and I was really, really trying to do more than just say, okay, Trayvon signed. But at that point, that's what you guys wanted to hear, and that's what was necessary. But now we have to look into what it really means. Well, first of all, it means they're going to save money because Travon Walker, I think, is going to have another good season. If he has an 8.5, 9 sack season this year and the Jaguars make the playoffs, this contract would have been $150 million in the offseason. So they're getting ahead of it. The other thing that they're probably going to end up turning their attention to, at least if you listen to EVP Tony Baselli when he was at the owners meeting, is they want Parker Washington too, and they want Antonio Johnson to stay as well. So I would suspect that they will get contract extensions with them. The only player that they've signed as a free agent is Chris Rodriguez Jr., who will be the obviously replacement, at least numbers wise, for Travis Etienne or Achan. And Devin Lloyd he signed, and they didn't re-sign Devin Lloyd. So here was the priority. The priority wasn't we're going to replace those guys with cheaper alternatives. The priority was we can't re-sign them to those numbers and these other three guys to these numbers. It's just not feasible for us to continue to do that way. So they're going to go get the money that they've earned, and we're going to reposition ourselves and do things differently. You get Trayvon, you get Parker Washington, and then if you turn around and get on Antonio Johnson, what that does is keeps 3 young, hardworking core members, guys that not only play well and put up numbers and produce, but actually lead you to some victories. And you can point to them and say, we wouldn't have won this game without those 3. Matter of fact, you take those 3 dudes off, and I know this isn't saying much because the Jaguars had other injuries with Travis Hunter and Jordan Lewis. I was just going to tell you, you take them off, man, I don't even know if the Jaguars make the playoffs. And that's not a stretch to even say that. So for me, what it represents is this year in free agency is used to fortify the future and to position them next year, because everyone's still under contract this year. Whatever Parker Washington signs for is going to be a deal based if you base it on what he could possibly get next season. Whatever Antonio Johnson signs for or re-signs for is going to be a steal when the 2027 season starts. They're going to have them under contract. They're going to be starters. They're probably going to have another year of playing really, really well for the team. And you're going to be able to get them at what is considered a bargain. Like, for instance, right now, Trevor Lawrence's contract is a bargain compared to what these other quarterbacks are now getting a couple of years after he signed his contract extension. It just is what it is. I think what they got Jacoby Myers for is a bargain, considering that there are other guys that didn't impact their team the way he did that got a little bit bigger money in free agency. So or, bigger commitments. But a lot of that is just the time. So the Jaguars are really, really getting ahead of it. So for people that don't believe that the Jaguars have, quote unquote, done anything in free agency, well, what they did was they re-signed their own players, but they just did it early. At least one so far, and we believe that they have 2 more on the way. But the message is being sent in another way. The message is sent that your character, your football character matters. How hard you work, how much you sow into the team, how much the people on the team believe in you and your ability. If you do the things that they ask you to do and you do them well and you work extremely hard, they're going to notice it and they're going to keep you around. And they're not going to pay attention to the emotion of chasing numbers. People have told you over and over again, sacks, the actual number doesn't matter. I've seen dudes get credit for sacks when all they did was just stay where they were supposed to be and somebody else chased the quarterback right into them. If that happened 4 times and they ended up with 10 sacks, they probably should have had 6, but they have 10, and everybody looks at them and like, oh, you got 10 sacks. But they're not watching the plays. They're not watching how it affects everybody else. If you want to see Trayvon Walker at his best, go back and look at the tape against Denver. Just go back and look at the tape against Denver once he got healthy and started playing a certain way at the end of the game. And you can't tell me that that's not one of the most dominant NFL players in the league playing against a very good team on the road. And he was instrumental in knocking them off of their square. Trust me, Denver's coaches saw it and they know it. The other team's coaches see it and they know it. The other scouts see it and they know it. It seems like sometimes the only people that don't know it are people that are doing mental gymnastics about statistics, or folks that already had this little agenda about Trayvon because they thought somebody else should have been the number 1 pick. And it's just going to keep coming up over and over again. Well, I tell you what, every time it comes up now, Google Trayvon Walker extension and turn it around and show it to them in their face. And now they got to understand that you and your friends and your little buddies are the only ones that feel like that, because the team, the people that make decisions, they don't. And your emotions don't matter. You follow the money. The money says 77 guaranteed over a new extension. That's what he got. Y'all got to deal with it. I'm sorry that everyone went out on a limb and was so gung-ho that it wasn't going to happen. And I'm trying to give you grace by saying, without saying I told you so, but I kind of told you that his value was a little bit more than y'all thought it was. Not only around the league, but to the team that just gave him all that money. Don't worry about it, because there's more to come, just like there's more to come here on Locked On Jaguars. We'll have a bonus show later on and a squad show here on our network. Man, make sure y'all tap in, and then I'll be putting shorts and posting stuff all day. We'll look at later on who's next for the Jaguars, who's next to get those contract extensions. And I'll tell you about all of that on the next episode of Locked On Jaguars. Thank y'all for joining us, making us your first listen. We don't take it for granted. We appreciate you here on Locked On Jaguars.